another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, UM Hoops. It's Monday morning, February 22nd. Couple wins over the weekend, Dylan. None bigger than Michigan.
I feel like it's been a long time since the pod went 2-0 before we recorded.
This is very true. We've had years where like both programs are kind of careening toward each other. This is not one of those years. But we're going to talk about two wins. We'll talk Michigan State on the back end. Obviously, we'll first and foremost get to Michigan and Ohio State, one of the best games certainly of this year, probably that the program's been a part of, at least since I've been on the beat. It's definitely up there. First, though, what do you got cooking on UM Hoops that people should be signing up for and giving you some of their hard-earned money?
We're all over this game. I think we've posted 5 or 6 articles on this game. We're going to have 5 key plays probably up before this podcast is up, so check out that as well. It's obviously a pretty fun game to go back and look at some of the key plays from a game that really was back and forth the whole way. I think it was a 2-possession game the whole day until those final few minutes. So that'll be fun to dive into. What do you have over at The Athletic?
Yeah, wrote about Hunter Dickinson last night. He was just tremendous in that game. So wrote a little bit about what he did against Ohio State. I feel like his age just constantly comes up, right? And literally during the game yesterday, while a lot of national people and stuff like that are watching like a full Michigan game for the first time this year, got like a couple texts that were just, how is Hunter Dickinson a 20-year-old freshman? So I wrote it. So that's what I wrote about, and wrote about Michigan State prior to that. And got a lot more stuff coming this week.
Awesome. Should we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Your initial takeaways on this game. First of all, can we put something to rest?
Okay.
This notion that this game was a boxing match. I'm not feeling that at all. I thought this was beautiful. Was it tough? Were there a couple plays where multiple guys fell on the ground? Yes. But this was a 92-87 exhibition of offense and scoring and talent and skill. I thought it was a great basketball game.
So you're saying boxers aren't skilled? Isn't boxing more of an art form? Isn't it more of a back and forth? I think it's more about the momentum than the quality of play. Right? We're not calling it a UFC match over here.
Okay, so you think it's more of the back and forth?
Yeah, I think so. In a game that is sort of like, I think I had that stat right, that it wasn't more than a 2-possession game until the final 4 or 5 minutes. So yeah, to me, that's I think when you get those sort of back and forth boxing metaphors. That's what I've always thought.
All right,
like it wasn't about a physical boxing match or a war drill or any of that.
That's what I was interpreting it as, like, oh, this is classic Big Ten boxing match basketball. I'm like, what?
I just think it means more of back and forth, and it's an easy metaphor for people to make.
There we go. No, I'll buy that.
This game to me gave major Michigan-Purdue vibes from, 2018?
Yes.
When Michigan went to West Lafayette. And in that case, Michigan was the Ohio State. Michigan was the team that was spreading the kind of bigger team out, and neither team could really guard each other, but the team that played through the post ended up winning that game. Purdue won 92-88. Very similar, in my opinion, just how both teams are set up. And when I was writing the preview, it was pretty obvious. I don't really know how either team sets up to guard the other one.
Right.
They both play exactly into the other team's defensive weakness, and I think that's really what we saw over 40 minutes. I mean, and that led to great stuff. I think both coaches are adept enough in what they draw up to really focus in on that and draw plays that exploit the other weakness. And then I just don't know it's just kind of a battle of wills where what are you going to do? Like you have to just keep trying to score more points. And eventually Michigan got a few second chances and a few steals, and that was the game.
First of all, fun fact about that game at Purdue, the next day was D-Day at Michigan State. I'll never forget it. I was getting ready to drive back from Purdue to go to a game at Michigan State the next day when I got the text that Mark Hollis was about to resign. And then a couple hours later, the ESPN story dropped. It was a day that will live in infamy. But anyway, building on what you said, yesterday's game to me it really felt like who's going to blink first, right? Because they were just going back and forth, and neither team would put together 3 or 4 empty possessions, right? And Ohio State kind of blinked first. I don't want to put it all on the kid who made the behind the back pass, but that was just such a ridiculous turnover at that point in what was such a well played game. And the fact that it wasn't only a turnover, but then turned into a 3-point play the other way. I mean, that really.
Him? Oh, wait, that was also Justice Suing.
Same guy, right? Who made the pass? Yeah, just brutal.
Ohio State was pretty clearly running that ball screen as a decoy to set up Dwayne Washington on a double screen. And I don't know how Suing didn't get that call. I mean, if you look at Michigan doesn't actually realize the ball's loose because all the Michigan players are pointing out the play that Ohio State is going to run. And then all of a sudden, Isaiah Livers realizes the ball is just sitting there and goes and gets it. But if you look on the whole backside of the play, Michigan's identifying what Ohio State, everyone on that floor thinks they're running that play except Justice Suing.
Right.
So that was tough.
Yeah.
He also was completely to blame for the play when Shawnee Brown got those multiple offensive rebounds. Not going to be a fun day in film for Justice Suing.
What did he do in that play?
He stood there and watched Shawnee Brown go get the rebound.
Oh, that's not great.
Not great.
So, yeah, I mean, that was obviously, I thought the play that kind of swung things and certainly gave Michigan control. And then it was just a matter of, not making its own compounding errors down the stretch. And they kind of messed around, right? I mean, there were a couple chances late where, but they miss a free throw. I'm trying to remember what happened in the last minute where Ohio State kind of was able to cut it and keep it closer. But, instead of nitpicking, I mean, Michigan took advantage of the opportunity it was given and it won the game.
Yeah. I also think you have to give a lot of credit to how it wasn't just that turnover. Hunter Dickinson was dominant for a 4-minute stretch there where he really took over inside, and that was the difference in the game. And the stat I look at for kind of how this game played out was Ohio State had some incredible individual performances. EJ Liddell, Dwayne Washington made a lot of tough guarded shots. I thought Michigan probably got the better shots. Like if you were thinking about how the offenses played in terms of what they ran, the stat I had was 21% of Michigan's offense was like on ball shots. So you're like dribbling out of a ball screen and shooting, or you're isolating or posting up. That's a really low number generally. And then Ohio State, you flip it around. Ohio State, 44% of their offensive plays were on ball action. So really their offense came down to Dwayne Washington and EJ Liddell just beating guys one-on-one and making plays. They scored 1.28 points per play in those spots, which is really, really good. And that's about it. You can't really play any better than that. So Michigan's strategy was really, okay, we're going to take away the other stuff. Justin Arns, you're not going to get up 5 or 6 3-point attempts. Right. We're going to put our 5-man on EJ Liddell all night. And then we're going to just see if you can beat us one-on-one enough to win the game. And I mean, Dwayne Washington almost did. I thought that was probably as much as Eli Brooks has struggled one-on-one in a defensive matchup this year. But it's harder to sustain that kind of play, right? So when you're getting all of your scoring from one-on-one shot creation, it's a lot harder it's easier to blink first, so to speak. So I think that plays a little bit into how this game played out.
Yeah, I thought these 40 minutes kind of spoke to the whole of Michigan's season and what we've been talking about, that they have all of these guys, they have such great balance. They have so many different ways of beating you, right? Where in a lot of games, it's a collection of, almost like a pod of 3 players, right? On any given night, or kind of the trio that'll get you to a win. Well, in this case, it was, 5 guys in double figures, just like kind of everybody did their thing. The fact that Michigan won a game like this, 92-87, and Franz Wagner finished with 9 points. Pretty quiet game, right? You had a couple assists here and there, but like arguably your best player wasn't even one of your top 5 scorers. Like it speaks to what Michigan brings. It is a remarkable amount of balance and guys who can get you on any night. You know, when you start out with Eli Brooks hitting threes, right? And Shawnee Brown starts hitting threes. Just a lot of teams just don't have that luxury. And Michigan has it. It's really kind of speaks to what looks like Final Four chops to me.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to say, okay, anyone can beat you on any given night, right? Isaiah Livers puts up 20, whoever, right? You have to have a guy who demands extra attention, and that's Hunter Dickinson, in my opinion, right? Like, if you go look at those shots Eli Brooks and Shawnee Brown were making, they were really good shots. There was not a lot they had to do. A lot of guys can shoot 40% on those kind of looks, and obviously Michigan shot, they were 10 of 13 in the first half, and I think 1 of 10 in the second half. So there was some variance there. I don't really think the quality of shots Michigan got changed from half to half. It was just sort of a randomness of shooting.
That's a great point.
But again, Hunter Dickinson is drawing 2 to the ball whenever he touches it. And that's just an unbelievably valuable asset, especially when you have good players around him. So I think Eli Brooks in this role is perfect because he doesn't have to do too much, right? He can go and get you those threes, but he can also just focus on playing defense, being in the right spot. And there'll be some games he gets 4 3-point attempts, and some games he gets 1. It doesn't really make or break Michigan. And that's kind of the case all the way down the roster, where Dickinson's kind of gravity in the middle of the court just opens things up for the rest of the team. And you can see that manifests itself differently in different games, but all of that comes back to that decision of how you're going to try to stop Hunter Dickinson, and then everything else falls from there.
And you tell me if I'm wrong, because maybe it's just the perception you feel, or that I feel like kind of watching it, but to me, it's not only the one guy who might be doubling, right, showing like a hard double or whatever. It's almost like everyone on the court is almost like drag, like takes like a half step kind of toward, you know what I mean? Like you're like that pull you're talking about. It does. And like all eyes kind of go to Dickinson when the ball goes to him, right? And everything just opens up around it.
Yeah, that's because if you have 2 guys on the ball, you have 3 guys to defend 4, so everyone is kind of stuck between 2 jobs. Right? Everyone's in help side,
right,
and everyone's in a recovery. And the way that Michigan passes the ball, I think, is a really worth pointing out, where you don't have maybe a bunch of guys who are going to go and create 7 assists on great ball screen plays every game, and you have guys who can do that in spots. But Michigan made so many extra passes in that game where they'll catch the ball against the recovering defender and make one more pass to a better shot. And I think that you're able to do that because of the initial focus on Hunter Dickinson. But I think Isaiah Livers was really good in that, especially in the first half, where he would catch the ball, cutting to the rim maybe, and then could have driven into traffic, but just makes a one more kick out for a 3. Those sort of plays really make, I think, this offense special because you have shot makers at every spot, right? And I counted on that offensive rebound possession. Michigan got 3 offensive boards. After the first one, they made 6 passes. After the second one, they made 3 passes. And then they finally got the putback from Shawnee Brown. So that with that passing gets you A, better shot, but B, Ohio State's constantly in a scramble, and it leaves Shawnee Brown to go and get another offensive rebound because no one really knows who they're guarding. I'm not incredibly impressed with how Ohio State plays defense. After that game, they dropped below Iowa in Ken Pom defensive efficiency, which is a scary number. But it's just, I think that is what makes this Michigan team click, in my opinion.
Which is kind of weird. I feel like part of Holtman's rep has been defense. Am I misremembering that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always thought that. In the preview, I looked up. They have actually he's had a better offensive efficiency than defensive efficiency in over half his seasons as a high major head coach. I think I don't have the exact number, but I was surprised by that. They run really good stuff on offense, so that's not completely surprising. They also, like this team, it's hard to be a great defensive team when your biggest guys are like 6'8", right? Like there's only so much you can do defensively. EJ Liddell's incredible, but the Liddell, Kyle Young front court is not really going to just dominate games defensively when you're playing against Kofi Coburn and Luka Garza and Hunter Dickinson. It's like, come on, man, that's tough.
Right. So to your point about Dickinson kind of being this, having this gravitational pull, you still ultimately need kind of the maestro, so to speak. And, Mike Smith is just getting better, I think. His feel for the offense, his feel for where his teammates are, his feel for how everyone plays, his just kind of, there were a lot of moments in that game where, you switched the jerseys and it looked like Xavier Simpson making passes.
You're switching. Last time you switched jerseys, you were switching Northwestern and Ohio State's jerseys, and they've never won a game again. So I don't touch anyone's jersey, man. No one needs that on their conscience.
Oh man, you just have a chart of just bad takes.
It's right here.
You're waving papers at me like Juwan now.
Yep, I got my notes here.
But yeah, I mean, how good was he yesterday, man?
He was really good. The pass to Hunter Dickinson late, where he just kind of bounced the ball into space, and it doesn't even look like Dickinson was going to be there when he caught it. I thought that was really impressive. That
ended, for people that might not get the reference, that was the play where Dickinson caught it,
on
stopped,
the entire Ohio State front court.
He had Kyle Young on his back, and he had like this little reverse pivot spin to the basket, and he dunked on Young and a late arriving EJ Liddell, I believe.
Yep. If you look at it, when Mike Smith's driving and throws the pass, like it looks like he's just kind of throwing it into space, but perfect. And I mean, give Dickinson credit for going to get the ball, and he has great hands and everything else. But
that's what I mean about like knowing your teammates. Like he understands what guys are going to be able to do. Like you wouldn't throw that pass to, if Brandon Johns is at the 5 at that spot, you're not throwing that pass.
Look, man, he's been probably wanting to throw passes like that for 4 years. You should have seen who he was throwing passes to at Columbia. So I get that part of it, but he's really done a good job cutting back on turnovers. 5 straight games with 2 or fewer turnovers. He was having a lot of 4, 5, 6 turnover games for a minute there. Michigan really as a team has really cut out turnovers completely since the shutdown, which is notable given how much they struggle with it. Obviously, they've played teams like Ohio State and Wisconsin that don't really force turnovers, but still, I think that they were having a lot of unforced turnovers in January, and now they've been better with that, and Mike Smith deserves a lot of credit. Hunter Dickinson deserves credit because they were really the main culprits, I would say.
Yeah.
But Mike Smith,
go ahead. I was going to say, we talked about that glaring mistake from Ohio State that led to, that behind the back pass thing. On the flip side, Michigan had 1 second half turnover. 1. And I don't care if you're playing a team that doesn't force turnovers. That's still hard. That's still hard to do, especially in a high possession game. But go ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, Michigan had, like you say, they only had 7 turnovers all game, and probably at least half of them were on offensive fouls. Offensive fouls are an annoying type of turnover, but they're also, they don't lead to fast break points, right? So if you're going to turn the ball over, you'd rather it be a dead ball turnover. So that was useful as far as just like those turnovers in the second half by Ohio State. I think they had 3 run out layups off turnovers. You can't do that and win in a game of that magnitude, I would say. And those are usually the plays that you would think the home team. Do you buy in? Are we still giving people credit for home road wins? It seems like we're just treating it like it's a normal road win, but I don't really completely buy into that. If you're anyone other than Minnesota, what do you think?
No, I don't think anyone. Most important, all that really matters is the committee. It doesn't matter how we feel about it. And talking with David Warlock last week, I definitely get the sense that when it comes to weighing resume, road games will not be seen the way they have been in the past.
Yeah, but all the numbers are kind of unfair because, you go in the Big 12 SEC, I feel like you have thousands of fans in there. Maybe it should count. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
It's an uneven playing field, but on paper, obviously, a top 5 net road win is about as good as it'll get. But people are kind of talking about it like it's a normal year, and I don't really know if you can completely do that.
No, I mean, imagine that game in normal times. I mean, even a shitty arena like Value City, I mean, that place would have been absolutely rocking. There's a reason Michigan hadn't won there in, 6 years or something? 7 years?
Yeah, part of that was because they didn't play there in quite a few years, but
well,
can we talk about?
They've had some horrible games there.
Yes, for sure. And I agree with that. I think 2 or 3 years they didn't play in that stretch. So when you have Big Ten road losing streaks, a lot of times they come down to single plays at times too.
Sure.
Can we talk a little bit Michigan Ohio State as a rivalry?
Oh yes, you wanted to get into this. I'm 100% here for it. Go for
it. So you've covered Michigan since what? 2014?
13, 14, yeah.
Do you think, what do you make of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry in basketball?
The simplest way I would say it is that Michigan State is Michigan's rival. People care more about beating Ohio State, though, than they do a typical Big Ten opponent, is how I would put it.
So Ohio State is out here, gold jerseys. Like, what is all this? Like, I get but I also
I didn't know that was a thing. Wait,
what?
I didn't even know that was a thing until yesterday. By the way,
it wasn't until last year. This is what I'm talking about.
Explain what you're talking about. I don't even know if people know what you're talking about.
So Ohio State gives out gold pants to all their football teams that win against Michigan, right? We can establish that. I think most people know that. But last year, Chris Holtmann gave out gold jerseys that are supposedly going to be given out to any Ohio State team that sweeps Michigan in a season. Because they swept Michigan last year. And apparently Michigan players reference seeing that on Twitter or Instagram or whatever else. They really seem all into getting riled up about social media memes because there was something Juwan Howard was referencing about a video or whatever else. But what I'm interested in, I guess, Michigan is Ohio State's main rival in basketball. That's what I don't completely understand because they go pretty all in with the block M's, the M's blocked out and the videos and everything else. And they always have a pretty intense pregame package on the big screen whenever we're there covering a game. So it just feels a little bit like Ohio State's making this big thing. And Michigan and Ohio State have had some great games when they're both really good. Beeline and Thad's teams had some really good games back in the day. But if you're talking for me, a rivalry has to matter when one of the teams sucks or both teams suck. And Michigan and Michigan State is that game too.
Yes.
10, 20 times more important to both Michigan and Michigan State than anything against Ohio State, in my opinion. So I'm confused by that.
It's this kind of weird juxtaposition on both sides because, football skews everything. Because on football, right, Michigan looks at Ohio State and acts like Michigan State isn't its real rival. Michigan State, meanwhile, builds its entire season around beating Michigan. And that's kind of the benchmark of their, rivalry status, whatever. And then where is Ohio State to go in basketball? If Michigan is going to be concerned with Michigan State in basketball, which it should be, and it is, where does that leave Ohio State? What's it going to get fired up to play Indiana? Well, Indiana is already playing or already cares about Purdue, right? So Ohio State's kind of on an island. You need something to act like or have a rivalry. Well, it makes sense that it's Michigan.
Yeah, it's sort of like the football situation flipped.
It creates a weird spot for Michigan, though, where if you're going into a game where you're just all right, going to go play Ohio State this week, no big deal. And meanwhile, in the Ohio State locker room, guys are bouncing off the walls, getting psyched up for their huge rivalry game. You better be ready to answer the bell if that's going to be the shared dispositions, right?
Yeah, and it's a bit ironic that the year Michigan breaks this big losing streak in Columbus is the year that there's no Ohio players left on the roster. Because obviously, that was always the narrative, right? Xavier Simpson going back to Columbus, Karis LeVert going back to Columbus. Well, now the team that wins has a bunch of guys from Pennsylvania, Michigan, DC on the team, and they're the ones that win. So interesting little dynamic there. Sean D. Brown was like, man, I don't know anything about this. I'm just here to play. He got asked about it. He's like, no, I never thought about this game. I mean, like, I don't know. It's crazy to me because it is really seems to be, from the Ohio State perspective, a more important game than I really realized until all of a sudden people are talking about it and the way it's being talked about. And obviously this game mattered because both teams were really good and it was a great game, but fascinating to me how it'll play out. I still would
say, though, that even in just like looking at Michigan, that there is still I'd say a pretty clear line about caring about beating Ohio State versus playing Maryland, Purdue, Minnesota, whatever it may be.
I agree with that.
You know, like I would say it's a rivalry. It's just not the rivalry for Michigan.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
And a lot of it's almost like when you get these weird snippets of times where two programs are really good and go at each other and they like randomly kind of have a rivalry for 5 years. It almost kind of feels like one of those type, like a sidebar deal. You know what I mean? Like Michigan, Wisconsin have had kind of these stretches where they had, you know, these great games and they played the same way and it kind of felt like something. Michigan State's probably had a few of those, right? Maybe like at Purdue, they've kind of had like a little side rivalry there and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like Michigan, Illinois could be in a rivalry if we keep going here in a couple of years if they keep playing big games. But I will say the Michigan win over Ohio State in, 2012 was probably one of the biggest regular season wins Beeline ever had. And it was really hard for Beeline to finally beat Ohio State because they were just amazing in that kind of early part of the decade. And so they were a rival in that sense. But I feel like those 15, 16, 17 years where both, like, Ohio State was kind of average, Michigan was kind of back and forth. Like, I think I never really thought of it as a particularly big game, but maybe I'm just off base here. I'd be curious to know, like, I mean, I guess you can't really, like, no one will ever come out and say that we don't give a shit about playing Ohio State, but it just feels like it's not the same thing as the Michigan State.
A little forced. A little bit. And, like, it's Ohio State, so it matters, but it's just sort of, I don't know. I find we were talking about this on when we were texting last night, though. It really is funny the difference between John and Juwan on some of these things where, you know, Beeline would be every it's another game, it's another opponent. Like he refused
almost to the point of trolling.
Yeah,
like he would talk about Michigan State like that. Like, oh no, it's just we're playing that team. But you know, that's not how he actually felt.
Especially like earlier Beeline, sure, whatever, because he is a weird guy, and that probably was how he looked at it. Later in his career, when he knew that it was bullshit and would still say those things, it did feel a little trollish, which was pretty hilarious. But
yeah, I remember
publicly, though, that's how he went. Publicly, nothing was ever raised to a different level than anything else. Juwan, on the other hand, I don't think it is everything's right on the sleeve there, that there are situations that get him a little more fired up than others. And he certainly does not suffer fools, and he certainly does not act like things don't mean more than other things.
Yeah, right? He's all in with it seems like he's all in with some of that rivalry talk and whatever else. Like he'll get right into it. Whereas Beeline, I just think it's the dichotomy of Beeline. I think there's a quote from Zach Novak after that game Michigan lost to Michigan State where they threw the lob to Sean Sims and he missed the shot late, and Beeline was all pissed and came to Novak and said basically like, we're never losing to these guys again, and got all like into it or whatever. And Novak told that story, and that's obviously very different than what Beeline ever said for the next decade about playing Michigan State publicly. But I think it's pretty clear that's different than how he felt about things. It was just the image he wanted to portray. Correct. Whereas Juwan could care less about portraying some kind of image in that sense. He's like, man, we're going to beat these guys. They're talking shit about us in the whatever social media videos, which I just feel so far from what would be referenced in a post-game press conference.
Yeah.
Previously.
Yeah. I mean, some of the guys yesterday were talking about it as if like Juwan was even more fired up than they were about some of these videos, which makes sense though. I mean, like Juwan Howard played at Michigan 28 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever. Had has been a huge Michigan fan. Like, he has identified himself with Michigan for a quarter century. And yeah, he probably hates Ohio State. You know, John Beilein didn't hate Ohio State. He didn't care. But Juwan, like, yeah, you show him a video of Ohio State players dancing, he will get personally pissed off with it. And
you haven't seen this video?
I haven't. I have no idea what they're talking about.
I don't even know what the video is, so I was confused by that. I did see this stuff about the gold jerseys, though.
You're offended by the gold jersey.
I just think it's over the top for like, I don't know. I have a hard time putting that much stock into one or two basketball games in a season. You can't take achievement off that in a college basketball season, in my opinion.
I will say it's always a very weird feeling when you see like a trio of teams where one is rivalries with one, and then the other, like there's this almost this like kind of built-in system of who actually weighs who as the other. Like, isn't
that like every college in Pennsylvania have something like that? I would think
a lot of them do, yeah. In Philly for sure.
Like
in the Big Five, St. Joe's considers Villanova like its top rival, right?
I got news for you about Villanova.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Villanova, meanwhile, would try to act like Georgetown was its big rival, and it would be in part to Royal Michigan or to Royal St. Joe's, right? Because it would just be this insulting thing. Meanwhile, LaSalle would consider St. Joe's its main rival, and St. Joe's would act like it doesn't care about LaSalle.
It's like a whole podcast right here. We can break down.
Got to do
an infographic, get it going.
Even when I was at Tennessee, though, it would be like the same thing, right? You'd have like Vanderbilt would consider Tennessee its big rival. Tennessee would act like it didn't give a shit about Vanderbilt and would say that Alabama's its rival. Alabama doesn't care about Tennessee because Auburn's its rival.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Look at that. Big takeaways, though. I mean, for me, I feel like we've talked about this kind of as the season goes on, but like the way Michigan's schedule has ramped up, it's been really easy to say, oh, well, maybe just wait for this game. At this point, I think you can pretty much say this Michigan season, it's like get to the Final Four or you could have done more, right? Like, I think that's kind of where I see this team based on anyone else you see across the country. I don't really think there's a team that's notably better than Michigan. I mean, you're looking at a situation where everything's trending toward a 1 seed. You're not going to play Gonzaga or Baylor in that case until the Final Four. I think you'd be favored to make a long NCAA tournament run and then see where you end up. So I think at this point it's pretty clear, like, can you go and finish the job and win the Big Ten, and can you make a run in March? I mean, that's where this kind of sets up. And I think before, like during the shutdown, maybe there was some confusion, like they might come back and not know what they're doing or look disjointed. I haven't really seen any of that. They look completely fine to me. Do you agree with that?
Oh my God. I mean, it looks like nothing ever happened. Pretty remarkable, really. And like, so the national conversation, I imagine you saw this. A lot of the national writers out there were kind of who like to group things, right? All year it's been Gonzaga, Baylor, everyone else. Michigan has for a while now been considered probably among a small conversation for who's the third best team in the country. Mm-hmm. Yesterday seemed like and I mean, this is all just narrative bullshit. It really doesn't matter, but just for the sake of conversation, yesterday it seemed like Michigan really opened people's eyes across the country of just how good this team is. And now it's, wait a second, is it actually Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan, and then everyone else? Do you have any thoughts on that other than that this really doesn't mean?
I'm going to say the national narrative will be whichever team won most recently is the third best team in the country. I guarantee everyone writing those columns didn't watch the last 10 minutes of Thursday's Rutgers game. I'll tell you that much. I mean, Michigan's really good. Michigan's one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. The rest of it is just kind of feeding a narrative. Everyone probably thinks Baylor sucks because they haven't played for 2 weeks because they're shut down with COVID. People said the same things about Michigan. Like, if you go back and look when Michigan wasn't playing, is Ohio State actually the third best team in the country? I mean, these teams are all really good. It's very much a recency bias thing, in my opinion. Would Michigan be favored in a neutral court against Baylor or Gonzaga? I don't think so. Could Michigan beat either of those teams? Yes. That's where I'm at with it.
I think that's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I think it would be probably a 2-point spread
Something like that. We can
Something like that.
I'll pull it up on the Torvik.
Give me the Torvik numbers. This is what the people are here for.
This is what they need. Michigan, Baylor on a neutral court would be a 76-73 spread on Torvik.
Baylor favored by 3.
Baylor. Michigan, Gonzaga would be, well, that seems large, but an 84-77 spread on Torvik.
Well, Gonzaga's numbers are so metrics-wise, from the little that I know about metrics, Gonzaga's numbers are so insane because of their margin of victory across the board. They just murder everybody, and their numbers are kind of skewed because of that.
Yeah, so Michigan would be a handful point underdog probably in both those games. I mean, you saw Michigan and Gonzaga play last year, and
there's no way Gonzaga would be an 8-point favorite over Michigan.
No, I don't think so.
But yeah, I mean, but at this point, I agree with you where it's like, I would never say anything like Final Four bust because that's just stupid. And
anything happens.
Good teams lose games for reasons that are just flukes and just shit happens. So I would never put it that way. But this team, like the conversation's over of, is this a Final Four caliber team? It's a Final Four caliber team. They are absolutely in the driver's seat to win a Big Ten championship, get to Indy. They will have a advantage over some of their contemporaries in terms of national title contenders because they're going to be able to get down there, basically get set up, get a week in before everyone else.
That's a good point.
Get comfortable, and kind of know, in terms of maybe avoiding early troubles in the tournament that, we'll probably knock out one team here or there. Michigan, I think, will be in good position. So it's at this point, it's getting from February 22nd to April 4th. And how can you do that?
Yeah. And how do you stay healthy?
How do you
test
stay healthy?
negative
Exactly.
through all of that? No injuries. Big Ten race. So we haven't done a pod, I don't think, since all those games were officially rescheduled and how that plays out. Michigan's win pretty much makes it a Michigan-Illinois battle at this point. The best Ohio State or Iowa can finish is 15-5, and Michigan would have to go 1-4 down the stretch, I think, to finish below that winning percentage wise. So basically it comes down to Illinois and Michigan. Someone on my website made a little table here of the winning percentage for each finish. If Michigan finishes 16-1 or 15-2, they would win the title outright. If Michigan finishes 14-3, then if Illinois runs the table, Illinois would win. Right. And then basically you just drop down each loss between the two teams. So Michigan plays Iowa Thursday, Indiana Saturday, Illinois Tuesday. So you go and win those 3 games, you're basically in the driver's seat, I would say. That Illinois-Michigan game is basically what you call in the EPL a 6-pointer. It would basically swing 6 points, right? Like a win and a loss for each team, and that would basically seal the deal.
Right. And in terms of Illinois running the table, its next 2 games are Michigan State and Nebraska, but then the Illini finished the season at Wisconsin, at Michigan, at Ohio State.
Whew.
Ouch.
But so again, we're hype. I have a hard time hyping up road games anymore.
I know, but still, I wouldn't say it's a neutral court, though. I wouldn't say it's a road win in the normal sense, but I also wouldn't say it's a neutral court.
That's fair.
So just for the sake of conversation, Michigan is not going to get to 20 games. I think that's been established. Michigan, I don't think, is going to get to 18 games. What you see is what you get right now. And anyone thinking that more games are going to be added or anything like that, it's done.
There's no chance. Yeah, I think that was pretty decisive. I mean, the release basically said the rest of the regular season was rescheduled, right?
Well, I'm only saying this because I still have people tweeting at me asking me, is this game added? Is this game added? Illinois fans are still freaking out that this is a travesty. This is what it's going to be. So,
yeah, the only other day Michigan could play would be tomorrow, and well, they're not. So
I don't think that's happening.
So that's the schedule. They're playing 17 games, and they're playing the games that everyone wants to see on national TV, and they're not playing the ones that people don't want to see on national TV, and that's that.
Correct.
I
thought there was maybe a chance the games that didn't make the cut, right, are Indiana, Penn State, Northwestern, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did think there was a chance the Indiana game was going to be put in when they released the schedule. I thought there might be a chance that Indiana would be in there as well, and they would at least get Michigan to 18.
Yeah, that would have made sense to play Tuesday, Thursday this week, and then Tuesday, Thursday next week, and you could have got to 18.
Right.
I
imagine it's a logistics thing. I imagine it's not as easy as I'm sure that would have been the goal, right? Like, I'm sure that was attempted and not proven to not be feasible, would be my guess.
Yeah, and I assume that, did Indiana want to play that game?
Good.
I don't know. Not great on the island down there. But so we do get a Michigan State doubleheader to finish the season, which will be something. I'm a little disappointed it's not an actual back-to-back. I think that would have been just fun. I don't know why.
I think it would have been
Saturday,
awesome.
Sunday, like that. But so that's where we're at with the schedule. Yes, Michigan is losing or missing out on chances to lose games, but if they go and win all the games against the good teams on their schedule, I don't really think there would be much debate about the Big Ten title. Do you agree with that? Or
I agree.
Do you still think it's a situation where someone's going to try to claim otherwise based on win percentage? Or not based on win percentage, based on, say, total number of wins?
No, if Michigan takes care of business against Iowa, Illinois, it doesn't matter. I don't care if they have 5 fewer games than everyone else. Win those head-to-heads and the argument's over, right? I could understand Illinois being pissed off if it beats Michigan, loses to Ohio State in the finale. You know what I mean? So if it goes 4-1 on the way out the door with a win over Michigan and a loss to Ohio State, and Michigan finishes 15-2, losing the head-to-head to Illinois will have a case of being pissed off.
If Michigan finishes 15-2 and Illinois finishes 17-3, which would mean they run the table, or if Michigan finishes 14-3 and Illinois finishes 16-4, they would have
win
a
over
case.
Michigan.
Yes, which I assume to get to that point they probably would,
right?
Because those would basically be, in a normal time, I feel like those would be trending toward probably ending up with a shared title or whatever else, and you're going to say, oh well, a 2% difference in win percentage when they played fewer games. That's tough. I think you probably have a case there.
Yeah.
But it seems more likely, like if you can get to a spot where it's 15-2 versus 16-4, I don't really think there's a case. So that's what it'll come down to, especially with the head-to-head.
A head-to-head being big, yeah. Any thoughts on Iowa before we jump over to Michigan State?
Not
Iowa in general, just Iowa versus Michigan.
Run back whatever we saw Sunday. It's going to be I think it's going to be another shootout kind of game in that we haven't really seen from Michigan until Sunday. But look, Iowa's offense is the only reason Ohio State doesn't have the best offense in the Big Ten for the last 3 years is because Iowa's in the Big Ten, and they're that good on offense. I think Michigan probably sets up a little better to guard Iowa, but man, Luka Garza's a load. Foul trouble, anything can happen in those games. They played last year. It was a game up in the 80s or 90s, I think, in Ann Arbor. It's going to be tough for Michigan to get stops in that game. I think it's going to be an enjoyable, watchable game, just like we saw on Sunday.
I agree. And Iowa was kind of not left for dead, but everyone was kind of given the hard eye roll, right? 2 weeks ago, they had lost 4 out of 5 games. They were 13-6 overall, 7-5 in the league. To their credit, turned things around a little bit here. 4 straight wins over Rutgers, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State. Not the most impressive stretch, especially the way Wisconsin's playing right now. But
the Wisconsin win was impressive.
At least, but
by 15 points.
They righted the ship. It looked like this thing was about to nosedive potentially. But it was let's say it was a good time for this stretch of the schedule, and they took advantage. So
yeah, I'm not gonna. If you listen to Iowa games, you're going to hear about how their defense has been a lot better over the last 4 games. They've played Rutgers, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Penn State. Those teams are all very broken offensively, I would say. And you are who you play a lot of times, right? So yes, it's good that they played good defense, but how did those teams shoot from 3 in those games? They shot 21%, 29%, 38%, 33%. Iowa's defense is basically give up open threes and hope they don't go in. And so for Michigan, you better make those. And then if you do, I think you're in a good spot. If you don't, well, you better figure out another way to keep up in a hurry.
No, and Michigan's shooting 40% as a team on threes in league play. And it's not the difference between Michigan and a lot of other teams, especially the group that you just mentioned, is that it's not two guys you're hoping that they miss, right? Because for Michigan, if you're hoping that they miss, you're hoping that the whole team is missing because they can all shoot. So I don't know how there's a chance that Iowa's feeling good about its defense because it hasn't seen a team that can shoot. And now you get Michigan and, there could just be a flood of baskets here. So
I would say this next stretch, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, is Garza, Trace, Kofi. That's a huge stretch for Hunter Dickinson, and I think it'll kind of shape the narrative of what to expect from him in the postseason and what kind of matchups he might struggle with, right? Like you have the really dominant size with Coburn. You have Garza's prolific offensive ability. You have Trace, who's more of a move and cut big, who's not quite as big, but is really good. I think they're probably the best three bigs he'll play against all season up to this point, and it'll show maybe where his weaknesses really lie as far as matchups in the NCAA tournament. So that'll be interesting to see just because he's been so good all year. This is really going to shape the narrative even more, I'd say, based on if he outplays Coburn and Garza, all of a sudden people are going to be talking all sorts of who knows what. Your national takes on that.
The best guys he's gone against, he played well against Travion Williams. Travion had a real quiet game in that night, right? 14 points, 6 of 19 shooting. He's played well against Wisconsin's two bigs. The only time he really kind of got was against Liam Robbins. And,
the second time.
That's, a guy with legit 7-foot size who didn't really move Dickinson or couldn't be moved by Dickinson, I should say. And that's really been it. The Garza Coburn matchups, I think, are going to be especially fascinating. I think Dickinson versus Trace, I don't know. Dickinson's a lot stronger than Trace Jackson Davis. And I kind of like him in that matchup. The ones to me that I think can give him the most trouble are when he just has zero physical advantage.
That's Coburn, and that's going to be
Coburn. And to an extent, it's a little bit to an extent Garza because of how physical Garza is, that he just pounds the shit out of you and kind of wears you down.
Yeah, Garza's the defensive challenge for Dickinson. Coburn's kind of the offensive challenge, I think, where can he do anything against a guy who basically tailors his game the same way of just bullying smaller people in the post. And that's just what Illinois does with Coburn. All right, should we switch over to Michigan State?
Michigan State showing a little life. Good win against Indiana. That's the good news. The bad news is this week is Illinois and Ohio State, both games at home. But, big picture, it's, yes, good for Michigan State for getting the win at Indiana, and they feel good about themselves after kind of a tough stretch. Win a game, in terms of, all right, what is anything still in the conversation? If you win a game this week, you can get back to having the conversation, but I'm not there yet for them. But what did Michigan State show you this weekend that can maybe give you some signs of, maybe some good things could happen here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think you got more from Rocket Watts than you've got in weeks. I think Aaron Henry, we know he has that game in him, but to play 40 minutes, score 27 points, really dominate as he did, I think you're going to need, that's the recipe for this Michigan State team to be good. The big question is, how often can you trust it? And the answer has been sometimes. I think you have to give a lot of credit where they had that awful start. They were turning the ball over left and right, and they were able to right the ship, which is really hard to do based on just how the season's gone.
Yes.
Indiana's playing for a lot more. Michigan State's just like obviously they're still playing for an outside chance at making the NCAA tournament, but it's easy to say, oh, here we go again. We're down big early. We're not playing well. Shots aren't going in. We're throwing the ball everywhere. But they wrote it out. They fought back, and then they just kind of broke Indiana in that second half. And, I mean, that might say a lot about Indiana, but you have to give Michigan State credit, I think, for riding that out effectively. I love to see Gabe Brown get 29 minutes. I've been on the Gabe Brown train all season, so I play free Gabe Brown all the way. What was your big takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of this said, I think, a good amount about Indiana, first of all. But to your point and beyond, Henry and Rocket, like, guys kind of handled their roles the way that I think people expected them to, or that in an ideal version of Michigan State is what they would do. Gabe Brown hitting 4 3-pointers, right? Kithier, who's caught rations of shit here for a few weeks, played really good defense against Trace Jackson Davis and helped swing that game in the first half. Josh Langford scored 14 points on 6 field goal attempts, right? It was an efficient version of Josh Langford, which there's been games here when Michigan State's been really bad that you're seeing Langford take 18 shots, and a lot of them are kind of old Josh Langford shots where you're like, it's just not a good brand of offense. Did some guys struggle? Absolutely. Like Malik Hall, no show. Julius Marble got owned. AJ Hogger did not play well. Hogard did not play well. But like, even like a Marcus Bingham, he had, 8 points, 5 boards. He did his job. It was good minutes. Like Indiana, I don't think Indiana is so weird, but
I don't know if weird is the word I'd use.
Bad.
That is like the game that a team that's not going anywhere just figures out a way to lose at home when they just need to win, and it's just But I think it's pretty telling. It's the 20th game of the season for Michigan State, and 3 starters played single-digit minutes. It kind of says just where this whole season is of just trying to find something that sticks. And
changed the starting lineup, I think, for the 37th time this year.
And then don't even play the starters. Like
they didn't play Julius.
So what is the next game
so
start?
Let's just recap this though for 1 second. They put in Julius Marble into the starting lineup to boost his confidence, then put him on an island against Trace Jackson Davis, who's a horrible matchup for him.
Should be a good match. Why is it a bad matchup for him?
Because Julius Marble's pretty slow and Trace Jackson Davis is pretty fast.
Okay. Well, all right.
So it didn't even look like he could keep up with his post moves. You have to at least send him some help.
I don't know if there's a matchup that Julius Marble is as a strong defensive advantage, and that's probably why Julius Marble doesn't play all that often.
I wouldn't say a strong defensive advantage, but if you put him against another just kind of physical, brooding guy, he can probably hold his own. But yeah, they put him in there against in straight up single coverage. He just gets destroyed by Jackson Davis. You bench him after 3 minutes, and he doesn't basically play for the rest of the game.
4 fouls in 5 minutes.
4 fouls in 5 minutes. Yeah. So that didn't work out. But what were you going to say?
Hogard starts, plays 8 minutes. Malik Hall starts, plays 3 minutes. So what? The next game, are you going to start Watts, Brown, and Bingham, and then all of a sudden you're going to play the bench guys? Like, it's just that speaks to just the confusion of who you can count on, I think, and that is why it's hard to really take. Okay, Michigan State's figured it out. They figured it out in this spot. Are they going to figure it out the next game? Are they going to figure something out completely different the next game? And I thought the whole drama about Izzo's audition comment was completely overblown, but I didn't really think it was as inflammatory as some people wanted to make it. But it really does feel like that when you look at who's playing and how many guys are playing. And it's not like there's a plan like this is our best 8. We're going to ride these guys. It's, well, we got 12 guys. Let's see how we play. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's game to game. It's week to week. You have no idea. There's a reason Michigan State is 11-9 and 5-9, and a complete and utter lack of cohesion is high on that list. And to their credit, though, found a way in this game, and their heads are not above water by any means, but floating a little bit. So, you go and you pull a game out of their ass. And like, I think I said it a couple weeks ago on this, like, even though Michigan State is legitimately not a good team this year, they will beat somebody. They will have a game where the shots go down and they pull an upset. It could be Iowa. It could be Illinois. It could be one of their 2 games against Michigan. I will be not shocked, but I will be legitimately surprised if we get to the end of this year and Michigan State does not find a way to pull off one game that it really has no business winning.
I just worry from a Michigan State perspective that game was the game in Iowa City where I thought they played really well and kind of let it get away, and giving away that Purdue game at home back in January is going to kill it. If you do those two, if you flip those 2 games, Michigan State's 7-7, 2 Q1 wins added to the mix, and they're like completely a normal bubble team. That's what you look at. The good thing is, well, you have a lot of opportunities to get quality wins. So if you can figure out how to win games, the rest will take care of itself. The bad news is you're going to be underdog in basically every game left on the schedule. So that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And you could even go further back and like that Northwestern game when they just got Northwestern randomly scored 79 points and he scored like 30 in that game. It was just a total outlier, ridiculous performance. I probably sound like Izzo here, but I mean, between that game and even the game against Wisconsin on Christmas, like they were in pretty good shape in that game and kind of fumbled it late, if I remember correctly.
The problem is something's been wrong with Michigan State at one point or another. At each point, like at that point, it was the defense. They've been through a stretch here in February where it was just like the offense was stuck and can't get going. Right, they haven't ever really got both on track. Right, They fixed the defense since those, like the Northwestern, Wisconsin, Minnesota games were probably the 3 worst consecutive defensive games Michigan State's played in decades. Right, I mean that was just awful. Like if you go back and watch the film of those games, just no cohesion, no good closeouts, just bad defense all around. So I don't know if it was an outlier as much as how Michigan State was playing. The problem is they've shown at other points that they can actually be a solid defensive team. They just can't really get everything on the same page at one time. That's kind of what it comes down to for me. The schedule is just so tough. You go Illinois, Ohio State, you go to Maryland, a team that's playing to get in the NCAA tournament, Indiana rematch, then Michigan twice. I mean, you could cost Michigan a Big Ten title and stake your claim on making the NCAA tournament, Michigan is not a good matchup for Michigan State.
No, it is not. None of these games are good matchups.
No.
So, yeah. But and for what it's worth, when I was recounting all those games that could flip the other way, you could easily go the other way with that. Like they probably had no business winning that Penn State game. What was that? 2 Tuesdays ago. But yeah, so getting into this week though, Illinois at home on Tuesday, Ohio State on Thursday,
Which game is a better chance for an upset?
Probably a good question. I would say probably Ohio State. Just because if you look at the way, like the trouble that they've had defending postmen, and point guards for that matter, like I don't know. I would say Ohio State at least. Like they're not going to have size on Michigan State. Teams have been scoring on Ohio State by a slight margin. I'd say if I had to give a better chance of an upset, I'd say Ohio State over Illinois. What about you?
Yeah, Illinois had I kind of worry Illinois' stretch of messing around is over now. They had those like 2 or 3 games where they played pretty terribly against Nebraska. They won in overtime against Indiana. The Northwestern game was close. It was just sort of they just didn't seem completely engaged. But then just to go wax Minnesota by 31, I think they're kind of back into this and they realize like it's time to go win the Big Ten now. We messed around for a bit. Like that was the time you wanted to play Illinois. I don't know if this is the time you want to play Illinois, where Ohio State might be more vulnerable coming off a loss. I think you'd rather play them Tuesday than Thursday, honestly, but that they seem a little more like maybe you don't know what you get, but I also think they're they've been more consistent maybe over the course of the season than Illinois. So maybe there's a little less variance in how they play. But that defense is not good, right? Like Illinois is a better team, I think, than Ohio State.
I agree.
And that's not really the national narrative yet, but it should be. And Illinois is the team I would look at picking to go deeper in the NCAA tournament.
Well, and I mean, Illinois has the number 2 rated defense in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Ohio State's
Illinois plays both sides of the court.
Right. Do you have anything else on that Michigan State game, or?
I don't think so.
Is Indiana dead?
Yes.
Are they done?
I mean, like there's games on the schedule they could win, but is Archie Miller dead? Should be the real question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like Indiana, yes. They go to Rutgers, they host Michigan, they go to Michigan State, they go to Purdue. You think Archie's gonna turn this thing around with a win over Purdue, who I don't think he's ever beaten, right? I don't see that.
Let's just say that. So best case scenario, they're 2-2 on the way out the door. That leaves them at
9-11, or
9-11, 9-10,
9-10.
9-10 in the league, 14-12 overall. Well, at least the Big Ten tournament's in your backyard there, Arch. We'll see. But
tough times.
Tough times.
That team I think they should be good enough to make the NCAA tournament. I think it just a weird season. They've had 5 games that have gone to some kind of overtime. Just speaks to something, I guess I'd say.
And Michigan State, one of the things I feel like actually could be an advantage for them is this schedule is crazy. I mean, they have games just shoehorned in all over the place. They play February 23rd, 25th, 28th, March 2nd, 4th, 7th. So, look, they finally saw the ball go in the hoop at Indiana, right? A week after scoring 58 points in a game against Iowa, they scored 52 points in the second half against Indiana. All right. So if they found something there, right? Because the shooting numbers look, Michigan State has its deficiencies and we can go player by player, right? And pick things out. But I don't think that they're quite as bad as a shooting team as they've been. Like they are just remarkably bad at not making shots this year. Like it has felt like to a degree at some point, maybe water doesn't find its level, but at least rises a touch, So if you can find something, right, if you can build off that second half at Indiana, start making some shots and actually get on a roll a little bit, like you're playing at this point. There's no practices. It's going to be quick preps. It's going to be get out on the floor and go. So if they can find any level of momentum, like you have opportunities, right? Like the schedule that's there, if you can go on a run, you can 1,000% make the NCAA tournament.
Yes, and I agree. I agree with what you're saying that if you're a team on the outside looking in, trying to play your way into the tournament, the biggest commodity is to play a bunch of games, right? You want to be able to play games. You'd rather be able to schedule a back-to-back with Nebraska like Maryland did. That's going to save Mark Turgeon's job. That's a hell of a move. But you need to play games because you need to win games to change things around. So playing every other day is exactly what Michigan State should want. But you probably want to play maybe more than 2 games against teams that aren't top 7 KenPom teams to close out, to make your run a little magical.
No doubt.
So I don't really think they're going to just find their offense when they've been the second worst offense in the Big Ten when they go and host Illinois on Tuesday night. But
scenario for you.
Uh-oh.
If Michigan State can go 3-3 on the way out the door, right? So we'll give them a win against Maryland, a win against Indiana, and 1 win again in those other 4 games, right? So Illinois, Ohio State, 2 games against Michigan. If they win one of those games, and if they beat Ohio State and Maryland, that's 3-3. That puts them at 14-12 overall, and 8-12 in the Big Ten. Say you pick up a win in Indy, right? You maybe go 1-1 in Indy. Not in the picture?
I think they'll
in the conversation.
They'll be in the conversation. I think you're going to see a lot of mid-major bubble teams get completely shafted by a program like Michigan State, like Duke. Like they're going to get in the tournament. The way this tournament is setting up, I think you're going to see a very high major lean to everyone that gets in the tournament. And I think a situation like that is going to be like, COVID, Izzo, in.
Right. It's gonna be really funny when like 5 seed Loyola Chicago gets 12 seed Michigan State or Duke in the first round of the tournament. It will be complete.
Yeah,
it will be hilarious and also a little bit of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Michigan State though, that's those 2 games, that Iowa game and that Purdue game. You're really looking back, like those really were a great chance to right the ship, and Indiana was kind of a last gasp, but now you got to make a little more over the final couple weeks here. Anything's possible.
This writer, who otherwise is an idiot that I know, wrote a story that day off of the Purdue game that said when Michigan State's on the bubble, this is going to be the game that they blew. Just saying. All right, you got anything else on the door? Out the door? I got a couple minutes here, but I have a big radio hit in Columbus.
Everyone in Columbus was talking about the rematch of Michigan and Ohio State. I got news for them about how brackets work, and I don't know that that's necessarily a likely game to happen, but it's neither here nor there.
Oh, I will touch on the way out for any listeners who also follow me on Twitter. I caught a mountain of shit yesterday for tweeting about Michigan with the phones on the sideline, or one phone. Look, I was not trying to make a huge I don't think I made a huge controversy of it. I just acknowledged what was out there and went to the program and asked for explanation and a statement. I really don't think I was trying to blow anything out of proportion, so everyone can relax there. But look, I've been covering basketball for 15 years. I've never seen someone sitting on a sideline with their phone to their ear. So, that picture of Chris Hunter was out there. I got an answer. They were dealing with food delivery, which is pretty goddamn funny. I think Chris, who I've known for a long time now, will probably be the first one to acknowledge he probably should have left the sideline to take that phone call. But they could have.
The Howard video was clearly a play sheet.
I thought it looked like it could have been a phone, and to me, it almost looked like a guy, like, when you like force of habit, like glance at, like just take your phone out and glance at it and put it back in. I don't even like Juwan probably doesn't even have his phone on the sidelines.
Exactly.
Obviously.
But that's how you look at something in your pocket. It's the same deal.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'm just saying. The thing was making the rounds. National writers were talking about it, blah, blah, blah. I got an explanation for it. That's all it was. So I have no problem, catching shit. I'm just speaking to what I'm catching the shit for. That's all.
All right. I'm glad you cleared that up. I'm sure everyone will stop giving you mountains of shit now.
No, I'm sure like 3 years from now I'll be getting responses on Twitter, but what about the cell phones? But all right. That's it. You got anything else?
No, I think we just need to end this podcast at this point.
Fair enough. I thought it was a good one.
It was.
All right. Well, subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to UM Hoops. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends about it. Leave us a review in the iPhone store. And keep your cell phones handy. And tip your bartenders and servers.